Good evening. It is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Marilyn Watson. She's past director of the Child Development Project, which is considered by some to be the premier effective moral development project ever implemented in the United States. She's author, with classroom teacher Laura Ekin, of the book Learning to Trust: Transforming Difficult Elementary Classrooms Through Developmental Discipline. But perhaps more importantly, she has a great heart, and she has let that heart guide her in her work for the benefit of all children, with great empathy for teachers, and with a keen eye for scholarship. So I ask you now to please welcome Dr. Marilyn Watson.
Thank you, Darcia, and thank you all for spending your evening here. I just have to make sure here we go, figure it out. All right.
Oh, that's it? Yes, thank you.
And I press this button, and nothing happens. I press the button to the right.
One to the right. This one. There it is.
Wrong way. Oh well, story of my life. Just a brief review here. Behaviorism, or the theory that takes a blank slate view of the child, has been the predominant influence in theories of learning in psychology and theories of classroom management and education. Now, as you all know, John Bowlby proposed an evolutionary-based theory, a very different theory. The human child is not a blank slate. The human child, rather, has evolved as a biological entity with adapted dispositions to seek, 1, connections with fellow species members, and 2, a safe haven in one or more trusted adults by which it might develop into a socially competent adult. A very different view from a blank slate. As you might imagine, attachment theory has dramatically different implications for how to treat young children in elementary classrooms. We've heard a lot about mothers and babies, a lot about childcare and babies, but it is just as applicable in elementary classrooms. On up, I would also argue, but I only know about elementary classrooms. And it is particularly important in thinking about children who come to school not having found a safe haven or a secure base at home. That is, insecurely attached children. So it's a profound implications for how teachers should work with and treat insecurely attached children. In this talk, what I will try to do is to illustrate the use of this attachment theory perspective by the Child Development Project, to outline some results of its application in both high poverty and middle class schools, to describe its application in teacher education, and finally to illustrate its use in one high poverty elementary classroom. You'll be the judge whether I do it or not, but that's the plan. The Child Development Project was funded by multiple sources with the goal of developing an approach to teaching that would build into the classroom curriculum, the classroom day, the way in which the classroom and school operated, a focus on fostering children's social, moral, and emotional development. I think of it as a focus on helping children become the kind of people who want to make the world a better place and who have the abilities to do so. The Child Development Project was based on 4 distinct but complementary bodies of theory and research: attachment theory, constructivist models of learning and development, self-determination theory, and finally, family socialization research. The program evolved over maybe 10 years and was researched over 20 years. And it basically consists of 3 classroom variables. One I'm calling developmental discipline, which I think of as the application of attachment theory to the classroom, or a way for teachers to be in each child's corner. Another piece of the program was a piece we called collaborative learning, which is a way for teachers to build a structure in which they would be working on conveying the curriculum and the content, but at the same time teaching children how to work in friendly ways, how to build friendly, caring relationships, and while at the same time getting the business of school done. And thirdly, a values-rich literature program, a way to build empathy, interpersonal understanding, and pro-social values at the same time that you're building children's literacy. And I suspect all of you have read children's literature. It is ripe with moral issues, ripe with interpersonal issues, just a fountain of resource for the teacher. Initially, we didn't develop curriculum materials, but eventually we did for each of these pieces. I'll tell you a little bit about them later. I'm going to spend most of my focus on developmental discipline, which for me was the absolute heart and soul of the Child Development Project. Developmental discipline asks teachers to take an entirely different stance in the classroom. We were asking teachers to move from their role as controller, enticing and making children learn, to teachers as a secure base in support of children's learning and development. In other words, we asked teachers to get rid of the view of the child as a blank slate, possessing only the motivation to avoid pain and seek pleasure, and to think of the child as possessing evolved motivation to learn, to seek adult protection and guidance, and to be part of its community. You're working with the child, not on the child. You're in the child's corner. So practically, what does this mean? What does the teacher do? I mean, it's one thing to talk in these wildly general terms. What are we actually asking teachers to do? First of all, and foremost, is to work on building their relationship with the child, to build a secure, caring relationship with each student. How do you do that? One, you take time to get to know each child. You help the children get to know you, back and forth, personal communication. Two, you do nice things for kids. Why? Just because you can. They don't have to jump through any hoops for you to do nice things for them. When I was first going into teaching, the old story was, don't smile until Christmas, or you'll give up the classroom control. This is smile, smile, smile on the very first day the child walks in the classroom. Thirdly, in terms of building a secure relationship, is to focus on meeting each child's deep, basic human need for autonomy, for a sense of belonging, and for a sense of competence. We actually called these with teachers the new ABCs. I know the people who talk about this don't put them in the ABC category and don't quite use these words, but we wanted teachers to filter when they were looking at problems. Is it about the kid's autonomy? Is it about his sense of belonging? Is it about her feelings of competence? What's the cause of the underlying problem? Secondly, developmental discipline asks teachers to avoid the use of punishment and rewards. They are unnecessary for children who enter your classroom securely attached, and they further undermine the trust of children who enter your classroom insecurely attached or not having found a safe haven at home. Now great, they're not finding a safe haven in the class either. So in place of punishment and rewards, we ask teachers to stress intrinsic reasons for learning and good behavior. For example, help students see how their own basic desire for fairness and kindness apply to others. We ask teachers to have children think, how do I want the class to be? What's a place where I can thrive? And then we set our class guidelines based on the children's felt needs to not be laughed at, to be respected, to be taken seriously, to be treated kindly. In addition, we ask teachers to use explanation, empathy induction, and support to guide students' behavior. Inevitably, will they misbehave? Explanation, empathy, support. Finally, we ask teachers to adjust expectations to their students' abilities. And if they have classes of 20 or 30 students, that's a lot of adjusting. And when control is necessary, as it inevitably is, to use the least punitive means available. And at the same time, to try your best to convey trust in and affection for the child while you're asking them to leave the reading table where they're disturbing everybody's reading and go to a different table. You're not doing it in a way that conveys anything other than solving the problem at hand. And finally, when you make a mistake as a teacher, as you inevitably will, apologize. Trust the kids enough to say, I didn't mean to snap at you like that. I'm sorry. Let's see, have a little water here. So in a kind of nutshell, that's developmental discipline. You will get to see examples of it that I think will flesh it out a bit more before I finish. Now, I'm going to start with the second half of the Child Development Project, just as a way of cutting time. Between 1991 and 1995, the Child Development Project had developed materials to support teachers in these endeavors for everything but developmental discipline, except we provided them with goals for how do you create collaborative learning activities that also focus on building students' ability to understand and work with their fellow classmates in caring and fair ways. We developed literature guidelines that focused on helping teachers raise moral and social issues and discuss with the kids the books that they are reading and the books that the kids are reading. And we provided staff development with the teachers on how do you manage a class? How do you build relationships with kids? how do you help kids build relationships with one another? We implemented this program in 12 schools, in 6 districts across the country, half middle class and half high poverty. We assessed the program implementation and the outcomes in the 12 program schools and the 12 matched comparison schools. So we're dealing with 24 schools across the country, 12 program, 12 comparison. We use blind observers to observe in the comparison classrooms and the program classrooms to tell us, is there a program happening? And then we also had teacher and student reports to tell us what they saw in terms of a program happening. Results. We had some results we were delighted with, and some others that made us scratch our head. First of all, the one that made us scratch our head, there were huge differences in program implementation. We had not had this when we worked with schools that served a middle-class population. We were now working with schools that served a harder population for teachers to build a classroom community. Okay, just hold that. However, 5 of the 12 program schools showed high levels of teacher implementation compared with their match comparison. And none of the 12 match comparison schools showed high levels of implementation. So there was a clear difference between the schools, the 5 schools that implemented the program, and their match comparison. Unfortunately, both high poverty and middle class schools were among the 5 high implementing program schools. In the 5 high implementing program schools, students scored significantly higher than students in the 5 match control schools on many of the planned comparisons. Not all, but boy, a whole lot. And again, none of the planned comparisons were significantly higher in the comparison in the control schools. So we knew we were having an effect, a measurable, clear effect. For example, I won't go through all, but I've picked out a few of my favorite. The classroom observers saw more positive classroom behavior in the program schools and better teacher-student relations. Students reported more trust in their teachers and a greater attachment to school. They reported a greater learning motivation, more concern for others, a higher commitment to democratic values, better conflict resolution skills, and reported feeling less lonely in school. In essence, we found that the program schools, the children viewed as a caring community. And that was a key mediating variable to the other effects that we had. When we finished the work in the elementary schools, we then did a middle school follow-up. So we looked at the children from the high implementing schools, and we looked at the same children in the comparison schools, and we found that the program children in middle school felt a higher sense of community in their middle schools. Now, we weren't doing anything there except assessing, but they felt a higher sense of community when they went on to middle school. And here we found higher academic performance, both measured by test scores and by grade point. The students reported higher course engagement, higher educational aspirations, and reported that their friends were more involved in positive school activities like sports or clubs, that sort of thing. So we're looking at better citizens in the middle school having come out of an elementary school program. The bottom line for us on the Child Development Project was that in high poverty, as well as middle-class schools, the Child Development Project approach can be successfully implemented, can be made to work. Not easy, obviously, because we missed a whole lot of schools. 2, teachers can create caring communities using developmental discipline. 3, when they do so, this results in significant academic and social moral growth. However, we concluded it is still hugely difficult to overcome behaviorism's hold on school culture. So, what do we do? Give up? Change the program? I was unwilling to give up attachment theory and its importance and to give up developmental discipline. And I believed that if we could find a classroom teacher who really implemented developmental discipline well, that would help other teachers understand what it looks like as you first begin to build relationships and the kids kick you in the shins instead of smiling, but you still keep on working with that child. What does it look like when you start with the kids who don't trust you and who don't respond well to you? And what does it look like over time? Fortunately, we had the resources to do this. I decided that we would try to videotape in one teacher's classroom, starting from the very first day of school, periodically throughout the year. We asked a teacher called Laura Ecken, who was, for many reasons, an ideal candidate. 1, she was a relatively new teacher. 2, she had originally been trained in a power-based punitive approach to discipline. She was teaching in a high-poverty elementary school. Indeed, she was teaching in a school that was next to the largest, what do you call those places where everybody lives? Housing project in the city of Louisville, or in the state of Kentucky, as a matter of fact. It was a huge chain-link fence surrounding this living, I don't know what you'd call it, apartments. 4th, she kept her students for 2 years. This would give us a chance for a wider window. And lastly, developmental discipline presented a view of children and a way to manage the classroom that she really liked and embraced. I actually took a little comment from Laura to read to you so you can get a sense of her level of commitment. This is Laura's voice. When CDP came to my school, I had been teaching 4 years, and I was feeling really uncomfortable about the job I was doing. I had kids who were acting up, and I wasn't dealing with them very well. My discipline program was assertive discipline. I think it made me a control freak. If somebody was talking, or if somebody acted up, or whatever, I'd put their name on the board. If they got 3 checks, they'd get kicked out of my room. I had really started thinking that maybe teaching wasn't the job for me. But when I heard the CDP philosophy and the research about what kids really need, I knew that I could teach that way and that I really wanted to. So I embraced the project. I just threw myself into it. We were very grateful for Laura. She was not the only teacher who threw herself into it, but fortunately, she taught in just the right spot for us, and she was willing to let us videotape in her classroom, and she was willing to let us see the things that go wrong as well as the things that go right. We began videotaping Laura's classroom. And I also interviewed Laura every Sunday for approximately 2 hours. So I've we would talk about everything that happened in her classroom, talk over where she would go next. And she gave me an intimate portrait, as well as what the videotapes brought me. We did this videotaping from August 1996 through May 1998. There were lots and lots of problems in Laura's class. Lots of interpersonal problems, lots of academic problems. And I picked out a few vignettes of the problems and how Laura dealt with them. Let's see. Oh, I will also use just one child as I go through vignettes and as we look at the videos to give you some sense of continuity with a single child. It would be hard to follow 3 or 4 kids. So this incident happens, it's about 2 months into the school year, and it takes place between 2 little girls, Tralian and Sharika. They're both 2nd graders. They're in a 2nd, 3rd grade classroom. Tralian and Sharika are working as partners, and Tralian scribbles on Sharika's paper, and Sharika retaliates by pinching Tralian's arm. And Laura approaches the girls, trying to help them understand how they each contributed to the problem they had. Here's Laura's voice. Tralian came up to me and complained that Sharika pinched her. I pointed out to Tralian her part in getting pinched. Tralian scowled at me. I'm telling my mom on you. You're letting people pick on me in here. I asked Tralian how she would feel if Sharika drew on her paper. She said it wouldn't bother her at all. So I asked Sharika how it had felt to her, and she told Tralian it made her mad. Just as we seemed to be coming to some understanding, Sharika brought up a new piece of information. She says she's getting me after school. Tralian said, she pinched me on the arm, and I'm getting her for it. A little later, Tralian was coming in from the playground, and she said, you know, I hate school. I hate it because you're not allowed to beat the people up here who bother you. I can't take care of the things I want to. A piece of work? Yes. Okay. Tralian's problems were not only social-emotional. As you might guess, she also had academic problems. So I'm going to share with you a little piece. Oh, I should say, by the way, what happens here? Laura just lets it go. Nothing, no punishment. It stopped. The problem stopped. What she did didn't work, didn't help. But maybe later, we can't, what do you say? Build Rome in a day? Okay, here's Tralian and Laura around academics. It's not just Tralian, but I'm going to focus on Tralian. Laura's words. I've got a problem with Yolanda and Tralian. No matter what I say we're going to do, no matter what, they whine and moan and groan. Tralian will say, it's boring, I don't want to do this, I wish I was in another school. At first, Laura tries to get the girls to consider her point of view. I've talked to them about it. I've tried to let them see from my perspective that it's not easy to teach. When I plan lessons and I look at the books we're going to read and plan the activities we're going to do, I always try to think about what they want to learn. I've let them know that it's very hurtful for me to sit and hear them whine and cry and carry on about it. But soon Laura thinks better of trying to get them to take her point of view, and she takes a different tack. Eventually, she tries to figure out how to support the students in their work. With Tralian, I've started doing a lot of one-on-one meetings because if you give her a sheet with 2 or 3 things on it, she's out of whack. She'll start crying. So I outline for her how she can get through it. Let's do this first. Then we can do onto this. You can do it. You can just move on. And I try to be encouraging. You can do it. I've seen you do it. You might have some problems with it. People have problems with things, but you can do it. Hang on to that phrase. You can do it. It'll come back. Okay. Those are examples of Laura's dealing with the problems. The first, wow, not going anywhere. The second, beginning to move a little bit. Whoops. By the end of the first year, students gradually became genuinely engaged in their learning. The fights, the teasing, the outbursts, the emotional breakdowns became less frequent. They were still there, but they became less frequent. The partner activities that Laura did just about every day became amazingly smooth, though there were so many problems in getting it to work. And much of that is outlined in Learning to Trust, the kinds of problems Laura faced as she moved through the year. But they became more productive. The class's reading improved. And most importantly, the students became a little more accepting of Laura's help. It wasn't pushing her off. So now we come to year 2. Twelve of the second graders stayed in the class, moving up to 3rd grade, and 8 new students joined the class. At least 3 of the new students had significant learning and behavior problems. However, a unique advantage that Laura had the second year is that the returning students, by and large, began the year trusting Laura. And Laura could use the returning students to help her build a caring community in the classroom, to help her get the procedures of the classroom in place. I'm going to show you a videotape from the first week of school of the second year. In this videotape, the children will be doing something called book boxes. And book boxes is an alternative to a common reading instructional program in elementary schools called circle reading or reading group, where one child at a time reads and the teacher listens and corrects that child. In book boxes, the books in the classroom have been sorted by reading level. The kids choose autonomously the books they would like to read in their book boxes. And when it comes time to read, they get their book boxes, they sit at their table. The children in this classroom sit 4 to a round table. They sit at their table and they read out loud quietly. And Laura circulates around the classroom, moving from student to student, listening to a student read, maybe helping this one student, moving on to another, not getting to every student on any one day, but over the course of a week, interacting with every student. But the students are doing reading the entire time, or for the most part, the entire time. This video opens with Laura introducing book boxes. You'll hear her voice, and then the kids go to get their boxes. So I think that may be enough to give you a sense. Now, I do this. No, that was wrong. Okay, I need your help. need to go back, and I need to figure out how to get onto. I got it. I apologize. I tried not to put you through this. I think I have it. It was working earlier when I checked it.
Yeah, you might see if somebody at your table wants to trade, or you can just ask and say, hey, the book's too hard, I need to get another one. And we do this in an organized way. I'd like for Monday to go back and get your book boxes, and then we're just going to sit down and read.
Could you in the rain? I would not, could not in the rain. Not in the dark, not on a train, not in a car.
Speak word after.
This is Tralian.
He sleeps in a cabin that bear. Miss Zach, I want to see it. Miss Zach, what is this?
Let's hear.
This.
This right here?
No, this.
Okay, what do you see a little word in there?
Bus.
Bust.
As you watched it.
Buster, okay.
Bus. And drinks.
Human.
Blood.
Okay. Now, you know when you're reading, if you find out that there's like 5 words on the page you can't read, that might be a little bit too difficult for you. You might want to choose another book, okay? All right.
A big black car drove up. Who died? Different thing. Maybe Mr.
2 words in there. You know, what's that first word? Rat.
Ben.
It's that UR makes the rat. Okay.
Redbird. Said Arthur. A girl gets out.
That's got out. Okay. Now, what's it feel like to you, this book? Huh?
It's hard.
Yeah, it is hard. And right now, I'd like to just see you be able to say, this is not a time where we're going to do hard work. This is a time we're just going to read and relax. And I'd like to see you have a book in your hand where you can just read it and have a lot of fun reading it, okay? Have you got one in here you can do that with? Let's try that and see if this is better.
I will go into the zoo. I want to see I want to see it. Yes, I do.
Okay.
I would like to live this way. This is where I want to stay.
Well, how does it feel to read this? Yeah, and that's what, when you're doing book boxes, that's what we want to do. We want to feel fine, okay? So it's a pleasant thing to do, and you're not struggling. But now that doesn't mean don't come back to this in a few weeks as you learn more words and you get back in the routine of school. We've only been here 5 days, so get back in the routine and practice your reading, and then try the harder stuff.
Look what they doing.
It's cute, isn't it? It's like he's getting a manicure at the zoo. He's at the beauty shop. Okay.
I would like to live in. I already read it.
Attachment, autonomy, belonging, competence, it's all there. Okay, as the year progressed, there were lots of learning problems that surfaced. But the students were much more willing to seek and accept Laura's help and guidance. And Laura was able to place more trust in her students. I'm going to go back. Before I do that, I will share you one more example of working with Tralian. If you recall Tralian having an argument with Sharika, and who hated school because you couldn't punch the people out that bothered you. So here's an instance of Tralian, and this is about halfway through the second year. So there's been a lot of trust built up. In this vignette, Tralian is leaving the lunchroom, lining up to leave the lunchroom. And she wants to get in line behind her friend, and she shoves Tyrone out of line. Tyrone complains to Laura, and Laura simply tells Tralian in a business-like way, Tralian, that was Tyrone's part in the line, just let him get it, and let's go out to recess. That would have usually been enough, but it wasn't in this case. So here's what happened. And this again is Laura's voice. Before we could get all the way outside, Tralian was screaming at Tyrone. Your mom uses crack cocaine. Your mom's a crackhead. I asked her to just step aside so we could talk. I asked her why she had called his mother this, and she said, because she is, and he lied on me and said I pushed him out of line and I didn't touch him. I said, you know, Tralian, you're lying to yourself. I saw you push him out of line. You wanted to be with Ella, and so you shoved him out of the way. You know I'm not going to allow that. I'm not going to allow you to call his mother names. Can you imagine how painful it is for Tyrone to know that about his mother, to suffer all the pain from that, and then to come to school and have you make his pain even worse? That's just not right. I said, you know, you said some really ugly things to Tyrone, and I think it'd probably be best if you took care of that. She just stood there and looked at me. So I said, when you have a plan, just find me and let me know. But I think you should take care of it before the day is over. About an hour later, Tralian came up to me and kind of stood there. So I asked her if she had a plan. She said, I need to tell him I'm sorry. And I didn't mean any of it, and I was just mad, and that's the way I said it. I asked her if she wanted him to come out in the hall so she could tell him that privately. And she said, yeah, but first I need a drink. I told her, listen, you go get a drink, and I'll tell Tyrone you want to see him in the hall. Consider the trust. The kids are going outside in the hall unsupervised. When Tyrone came back in, he was happy, and so was Tralian. She told me he said it was all right. Clearly, we don't have a perfectly behaved class, but there is real progress. There is real progress. All right, let's look at the rest of the year. The students willingly engaged in learning activities. They worked with every child in the class. The cooperative learning activities just buzzed. The reading skills partner work improved dramatically. The students grew socially, morally, and academically. There was fun in the classroom. The kids liked each other. The class became truly a caring learning community. And I think that's illustrated in this next video, which is also book boxes. And it's the kids reading in their book boxes in April, just a few weeks before school is over. So you get a real sense of the end of the year. This video opens, you will hear Laura, a child's voice, and Laura is sitting with one child. And the videotape follows Laura as she moves to 3 different kids. And you'll see the kids reading, moving about the classroom. The videotape ends with Tralian reading. And this time, she is not reading Put Me in the Zoo. She is reading from the autobiography of Rosa Parks. Now, let's see, I get this right. Go there.
One private old man. He was an expert, ancient religion and myth.
That's myths.
Myth from around the world. He was so wrapped up in his studies, his neighbors were surprised that he had even heard of this orphan cousin. They were even...
Heavens, said Grandma Thorne, you have them too. Let me take your temperature. When no one was looking, D.W. held the thermometer.
The 3 of them started invisible and ink to solve mysteries. The right wrongs, others. They right wrongs, others don't see, and just for fun, the kids write their notes with invisible ink.
Okay, keep reading. You're doing a good job. Chapter 1. Okay. Keep going.
Where's that Max?
Can we bark? Can we use this?
The second. Here goes the invisible dog.
Oh, is that the invisible dog?
Yep.
You can barely see him. It looks like a cloud, doesn't it?
Yep.
Okay, keep reading.
Here goes the invisible dog. Where's that Max? Here, Max, shouted Chip. Chip and his friends were going to take Chip's dog to the dog
Tried to use the white library. It was very hard work. It was also very sad work because nothing we did really helped make our lives better. Then comes that day on the bus when I would not give up my seat to a white person. I was tired of black people being pushed around. Some people think I kept my seat because I had a hard day, but that is not true. I was just tired of giving in. Was off of the bus. Stay off the bus, the chapter. When black people heard that I had been arrested, they were very angry. They thought it was time to fight for new laws.
Okay. Very long way from Put Me in the Zoo. Okay, by the time we finished this videotaping, CDP was ended. It was done, the funding was gone. So what do we do? All right? I begin writing Learning to Trust. although we started out to use videotapes to show Laura's classroom, the weekly interviews that I did with Laura were such a treasure trove of information about what happened, about how the kids responded, about what Laura did, that we couldn't have hoped to catch it all in videotape. So I began to write Learning to Trust as a way of illustrating how Laura accomplished the creation of a caring community, how she built relationships, how she taught children to be friends, how she taught children to be competent and successful, etc. At the same time, DSE got some extra funding to conduct summer institutes for faculty and teacher education programs. We believed that there were lots of teacher educators out there who shared our basic philosophical underpinnings, constructivism, Dewey, etc., mostly not attachment theory, but we felt that the teacher educators would be open to attachment theory, as many of them hated the kind of top-down, punishment-based approaches, and equally the reward-based approaches, especially if they came out of a Deweyan tradition, which lots of teacher educators did at that time. I don't know if that's still true. So we conducted institutes with teacher educators. We introduced attachment theory, developmental discipline. We shared the materials. We gave them videotapes and examples of the curriculum materials that we had developed. Since I was in the process of writing Learning to Trust, we shared drafts with them and got feedback. Lots of the teacher educators expressed interest in the materials and went off and did things with them, but I don't know what. But I do know that a number of teacher education programs went on to use developmental discipline in their classrooms. And I'm going to tell you just about one, which is at the California State University at Sacramento. There were a group of 3 teachers who came together as a group to the institutes, and they decided that the materials from the Child Development Project really fit with their goals for teaching. And they were in the process at the time of abandoning the classroom management class that was part of the teacher education program, which was one of those classes where you learn about positive discipline one week and assertive discipline the next week and clinical-based discipline, et cetera. So the students would learn about a lot of approaches and not be able to do a single one of them. And they decided that they had a theory, that they knew what discipline should look like, and it was developmental discipline. So they integrated the aspects of developmental discipline across their whole program. In their foundations class, in their pedagogy class, in their student learning, student teaching. For example, a focus on intrinsic motivation, a focus on teaching social emotional skills, etc. And they use the CDP videos, as well as Learning to Trust, to provide their future teachers with concrete examples of attachment theory in the classroom. I was always felt sad that when we did the Child Development Project, we didn't have Learning to Trust. We didn't have a concrete example to give the teachers. But we did now with the teacher educators. So, in some sense, the Child Development Project found a home in teacher education. After using the materials and a number of the approaches, particularly developmental discipline, these teachers decided to do an email survey. You know, teacher education programs, they don't have a dime for research. Not a dime, not even a penny. So they sent out, they were able to reach 117 students with an email questionnaire. They received 40 surveys back, representing all grade levels, kindergarten through middle school. and all of the years that they had been teaching using developmental discipline and attachment theory. 39 of the 40 surveys they received were strongly positive about the program and the education they had received. I'll just give you a couple of examples. For example, 87% of the students reported that that the teaching of values and the teaching of social skills were very important to their classroom program. Also, 72% reported that relationship building and community building were central to their classroom program. Even though a number said, there's no time in the day, my school has so much packed in, etc., still 72% thought it to be important. I love this quote. It's critical at any grade level to establish and develop a strong classroom community and build trust and a safe place to learn. So not all their students, but 72%, that's kind of good. So I'm going to summarize. First of all, the work of the Child Development Project demonstrates that discipline based in attachment theory can have positive effects in high poverty as well as middle-class schools. The Sacramento State Teacher Education Program shows the potential of attachment theory in teacher education. Laura's work in the classroom illustrates the power of attachment theory in a difficult elementary classroom. But there's one more question to answer. Can a trusting worldview gained in an elementary classroom have a long-lasting effect when it comes after a long history in which the child has not had a secure base, has witnessed a lot of abuse? Some of these kids were in foster homes, etc., or in and out of foster homes. So 7 years after interviewing Laura's classroom, I interviewed 9 of the 14 students still in the school district. 5 had had learning or behavior problems in elementary school, and 4 did not. 7 were currently successful in school, and 2 were failing classes and in danger of dropping out. They were basically freshmen and sophomores, end of their freshman, end of their sophomore year. All 9 students remembered Laura's class fondly. They had really fond things to say. But surprisingly, the 2 failing students erroneously remembered Laura as conditionally caring, that she would only be caring if they behaved well. I will give you an example from one student, Louise, who said about the class, I remember that she was always fun, and it didn't seem like we had a real class because we was always playing games and doing something fun. And then she adds, our kids were pretty nice because they knew that if we messed up, she wouldn't be the way she is. She'd be strict, go mean on us. This is a child who does not trust. Did she trust when she left Laura's classroom and lose it? Or did she not trust Laura? I do not know. I know what I saw, and she functioned well in Laura's classroom. Lots of problems, as you might imagine, but just like Tralian. But she did not seem to me to be angry and unsuccessful in Laura's class, but she is angry and unsuccessful here. Now, let's look at the 7 successful students. We're, again, I'm only going to focus on one, and I'm almost done because I have gone over, can I say? It's late. The 7 successful students amazed me in that they could all describe particular ways in which Laura's class currently positively affected them. It I wish Laura could have been sitting beside me. The 3 students with initial trust problems showed remarkable awareness of the effect Laura had on their development. I began to think of them as little attachment theorists. We'll look at Tralian. How did Tralian remember the class? I loved Mrs. Ekin's class because we was open and honest. You had that honesty there. She was like our mother. Some kids was like struggling in homes and stuff. She was like our mother when we came to school. And that's what's so special about her. Oh yes, attachment theory has nothing to do with this classroom. I asked the kids the question, is there anything from that class that it affects who you are today? And again, Tralian blew me away. I learned to have self-control. I had an attitude problem. I could just have an attitude about anything. I don't know why, I just had an attitude. I learned to control my attitude. She didn't say emotion regulation. I learned to control my attitude and, think before I act. And then she adds, as you will remember, I definitely learned how to read, and I love reading now. I learned to have self-control. I learned how to succeed. Like she would tell us, just keep on, though you don't think you can make it, just keep going. The very words Laura used when she was in the 2nd grade of the first year she was with Laura. And she even said to me at one point, sometimes I can't do it, and I have like a flashback, and I see Mrs. Ekin, and she's saying, you can do it. I mean, you couldn't ask for a kid to have more. I've learned a lot from her, but I think the biggest would be reading and how to control myself. And finally, I asked them all this question, how she would hope someone would describe her to someone who didn't know her. She's sweet and caring. Is this the little girl who couldn't stand school because she couldn't beat the kids up who bothered her? She has a head on her shoulders, like she knows what she wants in life, and that's basically it. Tralian has learned to care. Tralian has learned to trust. Tralian has flourished. Okay. It's clear from at least Tralian and other students, if I had time to share their stories, that the worldviews of insecurely attached children that are changed when they're in a caring classroom can have long-term consequences for those children. Briefly, what does this mean for schooling in America? American schools right now rely heavily on reward-punishment approaches to discipline. More than 50% of our schools. It's everywhere, way more than 50%. In 2005, more than 5,000 preschoolers were expelled from school before they even got to kindergarten. An attachment-based approach to discipline can work with students living in poverty, as well as middle-class students. Untrusting elementary students can flourish in a classroom based in attachment theory. This flourishing can last across several years. Students in teacher education programs can learn to maintain an attachment-based approach to teaching. Our schools massively fail children in poverty, where trust and sense of community are lowest, and where children have the highest rates of insecure attachment. It's criminal. In the Minnesota study of risk and adaptation, a vast majority of subjects in their high poverty sample who completed high school could name at least one teacher whom they felt was in their corner. We keep changing the curriculum instead of changing how teachers view and relate to kids. It's time to replace behaviorism as the guiding theory behind school discipline. It's just time, damn it. It's time to make the building of trust and the teaching of social, emotional, and moral competencies cornerstones of our educational system, not a 15 minutes on Friday to learn about caring and responsibility. And it's time that more students find more teachers in their corner. And so finally, it's time for the attachment community to start working with the education community to create the school conditions that will enable teachers to support the flourishing of all children, not just middle-class kids. Thank you, and I apologize for going over. I do indeed. You're not keeping anybody else.
Let's take a few questions, if there are any.
I don't know what my question is, but my kids went to an elementary school that is a lot like this. Not this program, but they used positive discipline. They have multi-age education. So they've got, they've only got four teachers, 4 classrooms for K through 5. They stay with the same teacher, 2 or 3 years. The social emotional curriculum is really in the focus. And it's just amazing how these students turn out. They're always just showered with praise from their middle school teachers and high school teachers. That not only that they're not afraid to ask questions in class and really engage the material, but that they're good, citizens. They're kind and they're compassionate. And so I'm so excited that you're doing this, and I hope you all take this and everybody just takes it and runs. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I was wondering if you're in touch with any advocacy groups, any
a little louder.
Okay. I was wondering if you were in touch with any advocacy groups, any parents groups that are trying to help make this change more widespread?
I'm sorry, am I in touch with other?
Like parenting groups or advocacy groups?
No.
Okay.
I do occasional workshops with people who ask me, but mostly I garden.
Okay, thank you.
I've been retired for I don't know how many years. I just occasionally write an article. I feel a lot of passion for this. I keep looking for ways to shout it out, to find avenues, because it's so obscenity important.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for all the work you did long ago and holding on to that passion. I want to tell you about some of the work we've been doing here in South Bend because it really speaks to this social emotional piece of caring in elementary school. I work with a small organization called the Family Connection, and we run a project for our community foundation here called the Early Years Count. And we've been working in the community since 2001. Our focus has been primarily on early childhood up to the point where children start elementary school. We've used a curriculum called the High Scope curriculum. You may be familiar with the Perry Preschool study. High Scope is well grounded in, I think, all of the attachment principles and the caring for children in high respect. What we were finding was when children went to elementary school, started in kindergarten, there was no transition, it was an abrupt change. And so we were looking at how to make that transition more smooth, more caring, knowing desperately that the elementary schools needed it. I will tell you that when we started this project with a $5 million grant from the Lilly Endowment, and right from the get-go, we wrote in at least $500,000 to work with the school system, the public school system. It took us 13 years to get our foot in the door after having been parents heavily involved forever, joining this, becoming a member of the school board and anything we could think of to really make. So, but a year and a half ago, we started working with principals on just looking at transition. We have been doing an assessment on teachers. We had 5 pilot schools doing a class assessment on teacher quality, which looks, one piece, 1/3 of it looks at just the emotional atmosphere in the classroom, how a teacher treats children. Coupled with the assessment, or kind of the assessment was the door to enter into training in the responsive classroom. If you are not familiar with that, I think you'll be so pleased to know that there's actually an approach to train teachers in how to do that social emotional piece. So we're now working with 7 elementary schools in South Bend, many high poverty schools. Teachers are excited about this training. One teacher said this summer, thank you, we just don't get training in social emotional anymore. Everything is academic, and this was so important. We had teachers, there was one exercise where they were just shedding something, shedding a practice, and so many took a piece of paper, and what they threw away was the punitive measures of, writing names on the board, or the red light, or, green, or whatever color coding discipline system and things like that. So we're beginning. It's not there yet, but we're really excited about that progress and about the good material that's available for teachers in training.
I do know that program, and I think it's a wonderful program. I do, however, have a bone to pick with it, and I'll say this very quickly. What do they call their approach to discipline? Anyway, it's about consequences. And the book that Ruth Charney wrote called Teaching Children to Care, in which she compares it to bargaining with her grocer. And it's I think we don't bargain with children. So that's my one concern, and it's one of their pieces that they teach in their 5 days. But their morning meetings and their focus on starting the year with care, I just don't know why they haven't gotten rid of their approach to discipline. But for me, the approach to discipline is really the core. So
and I can't have a conversation with you because I can't speak
no, I know.
to that.
I just thought I would.
I don't know it well enough to have the discussion, although I haven't had a sense of any kind of a bargaining. But I will be aware of it, and I'll follow that, and I'll report back.